Okay, pet parents, let's talk about feline infectious peritonitis, or FIP. For those of you that don't know, FIP is a viral infection in cats. More specifically, it's a coronavirus infection in cats. And even more specifically than that, it's a mutated version of the feline coronavirus. Coronavirus infections are very common in the cat population, but thankfully, most cats are either asymptomatic, or if they do show clinical signs, they're very mild and self-limiting. However, the virus does like to mutate, and if a cat's unlucky enough to get a coronavirus that mutates in just the right way, the virus will become a variant of itself that then leads to the FIP disease. If the virus mutates into the variant that leads to FIP, more or less what happens is the virus infects certain white blood cells that then spread the infection throughout the entire body, and it can lead to body-wide and systemic inflammation, and that inflammation can lead to a chain reaction of different immune-mediated issues. There are two main forms of FIP. There's an effusive or a wet form, in which the virus leads to a vasculitis. Now, vasculitis just means that the vessels are leaky, and when the vessels are leaky, fluid will leave the vessels and go into body compartments that the fluid should not be in. And then there's a non-effusive or a dry version. And with the dry version, what happens is the virus essentially leads to granuloma formations in different parts of the body. Which form a cat has is actually pretty important, because the wet form of FIP is much worse to have than the dry form. Now, the dry form can turn into the wet form, and both forms, unfortunately, are fatal. Unfortunately, there's a ton of different clinical signs of FIP. Now, the reason there are so many different clinical signs is because the wet form of FIP will have different signs than the dry form of FIP. And even with the dry form of FIP, the clinical signs will vary depending on where in the body the heaviest burden of the virus is. There's a couple of different fancy tests that we use to help diagnose FIP, and if there's fluid present, we'll sample the fluid, and based on how the fluid looks just grossly to our naked eye, most of us are going to have a pretty damn good idea that the cat's probably infected with FIP, but we will still couple the fluid analysis with something like a PCR to get a true diagnosis. Legally, I'm going to tell you that there is no treatment or cure for FIP. Now, if you're a very proactive cat owner, in doing your own research, you may come across a black market medication that people claim does wonders for this condition. What you have to understand about this medication is it is currently illegal in the United States. Hey, you guys looking to store some drugs for your cat? Which means that I, as a veterinarian, cannot prescribe or administer this medication. Hell, they may even shut me down just for me talking to you guys about this medication. And what you also have to be very cautious of with this medication is if you do pursue getting this medication, there are counterfeit versions of this that are just expensive wastes of money that don't actually do what you want them to do. Yep. Oh God. Oh God, this is it. This is it. I'm getting canceled. Oh God.